Well, I think if they were running a real Bitcoin economy, and let me explain what a real Bitcoin economy would look like. That would mean that they couldn't borrow any more money from the IMF and World Bank, which, as I understand, El Salvador is still doing that. So if they couldn't borrow any more money, and they said, no, we're going to all hard currency altogether, then that would put them at odds with the U.S. immediately, right? Because the U.S. has to protect dollar hegemony. So as long as they have to keep borrowing dollars and they have to keep paying interest in dollars, in other words, it's like it's a gamble what El Salvador is doing. And I mean, it's going to fool a lot of people. It absolutely will. It even fools the Bitcoin people. Even they don't understand what's going on with that. I mean, I look at it like I would look at any other business. I look at it long term and go, what's your out for this? Because if you can't tax your people because you've got them on hard currency, so you can't tax them, and you can't steal it from them, you can't take it out of their bank account because, well, there's no bank accounts to steal it from, and you can't print it from nothing, how do you intend to keep your government alive? You know, especially the size of government that you're running. And make no mistake, those giant prisons full of those guys, we've all seen the videos, and all those prison guards, that's expensive. That's expensive to maintain that. And so, yeah, what is your long-term plan for how to continue to pay for that? Oh, well, it'll be taxes. Again, how are you going to collect those if you actually have real small businesses? Remember, real small businesses are the bane of every socialist type government. It doesn't make any difference if it's Mao, if it's Stalin, it does, you know, even mustache guy, dude, it doesn't matter. Any type of socialist government eventually runs out of everybody else's money because they can't maintain the size and scope of all of these crazy promises these governments make. So the U.S. was different in the beginning because it was like, well, it had to be paid for with gold, and it had to be paid, and they were pretty much using tariffs exclusively to operate it. But that was also a significantly smaller government, right? So the more promises you make to people of, you know, hey, we're going to have, this is going to be safe, and that's going to be safe, and you're going to be able to walk down the street and not have to be armed because we'll have a bunch of people doing it for you. Like, I mean, that costs money to do that. There's a cost that you have. You know, you're going to pay somebody to do that, or they have to do it for free, or they have to volunteer to do stuff like that. And there will be people who volunteer for something like that, but probably not as many as you think to have that type of socialist utopia that is usually demanded by voters. Because again, remember, voters will always try to vote the most socialistic nonsense they can. It doesn't make any difference. They can call themselves on the right or left. It doesn't make any difference. They're always, the right or no better. They say, we want more prisons, and we want more laws, and we want more police to jail everybody, you know, for smoking herbage and what have you. And we, you know, we want the war on drugs, and we, like, this is, it's just more socialism. The end result is just more and more socialism. It's more government, more money, and governments don't have anything. They have to borrow it, print it, or steal it. And if you actually have a hard currency, like a real hard currency that's in circulation, and you can't do anything like that, well, then it's eventually going to come to an end. And I think that El Salvador is no different. I realize a bunch of Bitcoin people will be angry at me pointing this out, but it's the mathematical truth. They'll either have a small government and they'll close down all those prisons and release all the prisoners because they're not going to have any money to incarcerate them, or hang them. That's fine. I mean, if they're really as evil as everybody said they were, okay, well then just hang them and be done with it. But the thing is that they're probably not as evil as everybody said they were. They're probably a rival group of people who said, hey, you know, this was our land. Why did you steal it? Right? I mean, kind of like Appalachia right now. And the history books are going to show the people in Appalachia that lost. It's going to, if there's ever a skirmish, it's just going to be, oh, it's a bunch of crazy mountain men that took a bunch of shots at our awesome federal government, and you know, the federal government won, and these guys were evil, and so they all went to the chair and what have you. I mean, like, this is the kind of crap that you'll see. You know, you don't know all the backstories. Anytime someone says, oh, they're part of a criminal gang or something like that, or they're terrorists, this is the stupid shit that people fall for. Left and right equally fall for this stupid shit. Because none of them are smart enough to say, you know, what the fuck do you mean by a gang? Can you give me a definition of a gang? No one can. Fucking nobody can give a definition for that, because as soon as they do, they're going to be guilty of it. Can you give a definition of a terrorist or terrorism or terrorist activity? No country can give a legal definition of that at The Hague, because as soon as they do, they're immediately guilty of it. Every country is immediately guilty of terrorism and terrorist plots and fomenting terrorists and on and on and on. I mean, like, this is just reality, okay? So it's just about which clan do you want. And for those, so the reason I can see all this, and I've said this on many occasions, because I don't clan. I refuse to clan. You know, the U.S. was not based on that. You know, now it's turned into that kind of weird hyperbolic bullshit now, but that's not what the founders actually intended. The founders intended a hard currency economy and an extremely tiny government, and everybody was just armed and they could do what they wanted to do. And you did truly have a fuck around and find out civilization, you know, back in the day. You don't have that anymore, and you don't even have the pretenses of any of that nowadays, because there's so many people that still demand to have. They want, you know, they vote for people like Trump who are going to make them safe, you know, and it's like, as opposed to making them free. I mean, that's just, once again, this is just the reality. I mean, and you could put me in the libertarian camp and everything, although I'm not part of the libertarians or the loser-tardians or anything. Most of those guys, they don't want freedom and liberty. What they want is no responsibility. That's usually what that means. If you talk to them long enough, you'll find that maybe 80%, they just don't want to be responsible for anything. They don't, it's not the same thing as saying, I want freedom and liberty. What they want is no responsibility for their dumbass actions. That's usually what that means. So, yeah, I mean, I hope that helps. But, I mean, as far as El Salvador, we'll see what happens.